All right, and I see we have some folks from Colorado, Missouri as well. Awesome. Well, we are at 2 o'clock, and I see our participant list keep ticking up. So I think we can probably go ahead and get started. So we're off to the races for our first session. So my name is Megan Ketchel. I am the project manager for the Disability Employment Technical Assistance Center, or DETAC. And we are so excited to welcome you today to session one of our Results and Innovation in Systems Excellence, or RISE, e-learning community, which is called the Past, Present, and Future of Centers for Independent Living, or CILS, facilitating pre-employment transition services, or pre-ETS. This community is going to be facilitated by Troy Hall from Able, South Carolina, who I'll give the opportunity to introduce himself later. Just one administrative item. We do have a pretty large group today, so we ask that you do mute your line if you're not speaking. And if we do hear any background noise, we may mute you as the host, just to make sure that it's a positive tech experience for everyone. You will have your own ability to mute and unmute if you wish when there's times to have discussion. But yeah, if you run into any problems, you can also chat in. All right, so today's session is called Comparing and Contrasting Youth Transition Services Across Publicly Funded Agencies, and it's going to run from about 2 o'clock Eastern, which is now, through 3:30 Eastern time, so about an hour and a half. And Troy, we can go to the next slide. All right, and here's our agenda for today. So this is session one of three in the RISE series for this community. So we're doing welcome now and going over some introductions. I'm going to talk just briefly about ground rules or expectations for participation. And then I'll turn it over to Troy to really take it away and get into the content for today around comparing and contrasting youth transition services across publicly funded agencies. And then toward the end, we'll kind of close out and give you some next steps ahead of our next session on June 26th, Thursday, June 26th. One thing I will note is that you should have all received the calendar invitation for this session. And then tomorrow we will be following up with the calendar invitations for sessions 2 and 3. So just be on the lookout for those invites when they come through. And we can go to the next slide. All right, so just a note around accessibility and our accommodations for today. So all of our e-learning community sessions are going to have CART closed captioning services, and you can access that in a few different ways. One is you can click the captions button in the bottom of your Zoom window, and you can show the captions there. One thing to note is you can actually also adjust the caption settings so that you see a different size font for those captions. The other way to access those captions is through that link that's on the slides here, and those slides were provided as an attachment to the reminder email yesterday. And let me grab that link again just in case you need it. But you can also access the captioning there. And you can adjust the font size at that link as well. Um, During today's session, we also have American Sign Language, or ASL, interpretation. And so that is something that we provide in session one. If you would need ASL interpretation in future sessions, we do ask that you reach out to us at least 3 business days in advance of the session by emailing aodemploymentta@gmail.com. And we can accommodate additional ASL requests for future sessions if we just get a few days heads up for those future calls. Otherwise, if you have any questions or issues as you're navigating in the Zoom, you can reach out to myself, Megan Ketchel, or our project coordinator, Rebecca, who is running the Zoom today, and she's under the AOD Disability Employment TA Center account in our Zoom. And you can reach out to either of us with any questions or technical troubleshooting that you might have. And then this is just our photos on the screen. There I am, Megan Ketchell, DTAC project manager with the Lewin Group. And then our DTAC project coordinator from TASH is Rebecca Frimpong, MPH, and Rebecca's in the AOD Disability Employment TA Center account, as I mentioned. All right, and here is just a couple of ground rules. So the gist of this is really that we want these sessions to be interactive and for you to be able to make connections with our facilitator in Troy Hall from Able, South Carolina, as well as with other SILs that are working on pre-employment transition services or looking to build those types of services at their SIL. So what you're going to get from this community is access to our team of awesome subject matter experts within our team at DTAC, the community co-facilitators at Able, South Carolina, and your peers. This is also a safe environment for participants to talk through any real-life struggles or barriers and look for ideas on how to identify support and resolutions. And then what we're looking for from you is just active participation of at least someone from your team in each session. And that could look like chat, verbal, video, audio, as possible. Come prepared to discuss your successes and challenges. Be engaged if there's any homework assignments in particular. They're usually pretty low level of effort, but we would appreciate if you do complete those so that we can queue them up for future sessions as well. These sessions will kind of build off of each other. But yeah, so that's about it as far as the ground rules. One thing I will note, you're welcome to use video in this call, but you're not required to. We greatly appreciate if you chat in. If you also have questions, you can also raise your hand or unmute your audio line to come off mute and ask questions as well. And with that, we can go to the next slide. And I am very excited to turn it over to our colleague and facilitator at Able, South Carolina, Troy Hall, who's the Director of Youth Transition Programs. And he's going to be our facilitator for this community. And Troy is awesome. If you participated in last year's cohort, Troy helped facilitate that as well, and he's also done some other subject matter expert presentations for us at the DTAC. So I will turn it over to Troy to introduce himself and then take it away with the rest of the session. Troy?
All right. Thanks so much, Megan, and thanks, Rebecca. Hi, everybody. So like Megan said, my name is Troy Hall. Pronouns are he, him. I'm a white male with glasses. Today, I'm wearing kind of a maroon button-up shirt, which I realize now is like really bringing out the reds in my skin tone. I need to double check that next time. On the staff picture, on the screen, I'm wearing a white button-down shirt. I'm the director of youth transition programs way down in South Carolina for Able, South Carolina, which is one of the centers for independent living down there. Like Megan mentioned, this is, I know everybody kind of takes advantage of these webinars in different ways. For some people, it's kind of like listening to a podcast as you're working. For some people, it's very much like it's the one thing that you're focusing on. I am one of those people that can talk to a brick wall all day. I'll be more than happy to just talk away. But I do want to make sure they give you guys some real opportunities to connect with each other and share your own thoughts. So if we could just start real quick, I'm going to ask everybody just to put a number in the chat between 1 to 5 to tell me how you are feeling. It is Friday, Junior. It's Thursday. It's the afternoon. We're probably already thinking about weekend plans. How are we feeling? 1 being like, man, I am barely here, and 5 being, I am all the way amped and for it. I don't even need a second cup of coffee. Oh, loving the honesty. We even got a couple of 5s, was not expecting that. Excellent. Oh, more than a couple of 5s. You guys doing better than I am. That's great. Okay, I'm gonna need a little bit of that energy. All right. So this is one of a series of three, so congrats, you're already starting step one. Today we're going to be talking about comparing and contrasting youth transition services across publicly funded agencies, title that just rolls off the tongue. The next session, we're going to be going a little bit more in depth, so we're going to be talking specifically about how to map Center for Independent Living services for in-school youth. So that's more about breaking down the actual practices of what we've done, what doesn't work, what best practices are. So if today seems a little like a generic overview when we're talking about concepts and ideas, and you're kind of wondering when are we going to get to the meat of it, that's going to be session 2. And then session 3 is going to be kind of a very frank lessons learned and some of the really common questions we get. And that can be like, collaboration and contract stuff and how do we engage youth, and yeah, I know we're supposed to do this, but that's not really working out, so how does it actually work in practice? So I'm one of those people where when it comes to trainings, I really want to walk away with some very concrete ideas and some steps that we can implement quickly. So just know that this session is going to be a little bit more about setting the tone and an overview, but if you guys do have specific questions or they just kind of come to mind, interrupt me. I'm going to try and leave a good chunk of 10, maybe 15 minutes near the end just for questions, but feel free to interrupt. Okay, so for today, what I'd like to go over is an overview of what youth transition services are. What does that even mean? I know a lot of us are probably working directly in that field, but maybe some of us are a little adjacent. So we're going to go over exactly what that looks like. How Centers for Independent Living can provide these services differently than other agencies. We have kind of an edge, a secret weapon, an advantage that I want to make sure we can focus in on. We're going to talk about what the actual data shows. So what does it really mean when we're providing these services? What do the numbers say? What do the studies say based on this? And then how Centers for Independent Living can work with their partners and kind of share that special edge they have with them and the youth that they work with. So I'm going to start with another quick question for y'all to just throw in the chat. I want to get a few examples. What is the most important thing a young person with a disability needs to know as they are transitioning into adulthood? So just give me a word or a sentence. What is the most important thing that they need to know? No wrong answers. Well, there are some answers that just wouldn't apply, but you know what I mean. No wrong answers. Oh, I love this. Advocating, self-advocacy, civil rights, and pride. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of advocacy. Entitlement versus eligibility. Very nice. Money management, super popular. Ooh, Tara said they can live how they want. I love that. Voice. We're all on the self-advocacy and self-awareness train. Yes, yes. I'm going to steal some of these phrases. This is good. Yeah, perfect. So when we talk about youth transition services, what are youth transition services, right? These are services that are designed to prepare and support youth as they transition into adulthood. So on the screen, you'll see a picture of one of my coworkers wearing a blue shirt with a backwards baseball cap. That's how you know he's a cool young guy who can relate to the youth, because he's got the cap backwards. That's a joke. It's very dated. But this is from one of our summer programs, and he is helping a young woman in a red hoodie who is actually filling out a goal sheet in this one from one of our summer programs. Kind of an example of directly what are these transition services. So this can be anything from learning skills, sort of in an abstract sense, very specific career or educational exploration, developing skills meant for living independently, and also that citizenship angle, so how they can be a part of the community. All of these things fall under youth transition services, and these can all be very important things that young people with disabilities need to know, right? A couple of guideposts when we are thinking about youth transition services. So these services need to be as personalized as possible. So they are designed for each person's specific needs and goals, right? Now, that doesn't mean that they all have to be specific, customized one-on-one services. There's still a lot of really great group instruction. There's still a lot of sort of wide-scale skills that you can learn, things that apply to everybody. But we should always be thinking, when we're thinking about youth transition services, can they be individualized or personalized for this specific youth in some way? The other thing is that no matter how talented we are, and I know all of us on the call are incredibly talented, but this is not something we can do solo, right? Everyone kind of has a part to play in these effective services. So this always involves teamwork. This involves getting teachers involved, parents or guardians or a youth support network involved. It also involves getting the students, getting the youth themselves front and center, and making sure that any other professional who might be adjacent or a part of this team is actively involved. So definitely a team sport. And of course, the main goal of any effective youth transition service is going to be to help individuals with disabilities achieve competitive, integrated employment and reach the level of independent living that they desire to fulfill their full potential, to make their own choices, and to be an active member of society. I also probably need to work in their gainful employment. Usually I always say competitive, integrated, and gainful employment, right? I specifically like to use these words in this definition because sometimes when we are thinking about something like employment, we might just think that the first thing that comes along that fits is the right choice. Whereas that's really just step one in a much larger journey, right? And then some of these youth transition services, while we work with agencies that might have a really limited scope, this full picture of transition looks like that independent living, like we talked about, being able to make their own choices, living a self-directed life, and also citizenship, right? So making sure that they are members in their community as well. Yeah, let's keep going. So when we're talking about youth transition services, we're going to be talking specifically about pre-ETs, these pre-employment transition services. Those are mandated under a few different laws, but most recently the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, which you might hear called WIOA. That was enacted way back in 2014.
Fixated on God. He's about to bless you.
Among many other things that that law says, that VR agencies, which is one of the partners we're going to talk about, reserves at least 15% of their funding to provide pre-EDs to eligible and potentially eligible students with disabilities. Most commonly, this is going to be between ages 14 to 21. That can vary a little bit. So like, for instance, down here in South Carolina, we're actually covered from 13 to 21. It might look a little different depending on your state. Quick check in the chat, and we'll keep it with the 1 to 5 scale. 1 being I am brand new at this, 5 being Troy, step aside, I could teach this. How do we feel about pre-EDs? Do we feel like we're really knowledgeable on that? Do we have room to grow? What are we thinking? Okay, awesome. All right, full disclosure over the next couple one of these slides, some of y'all are going to be putting me on in the background because you totally know this, but for a lot of y'all, this might be relatively new information. So what I'd like to do is to talk about these 5 specific categories of pre-EDs real quick, right? So these pre-EDs, these pre-employment transition services, they're divided into 5 categories. But one thing to keep in mind is that all these skills are designed to find appropriate supports and provide students with disabilities the skills they need to transition from school to employment or further education or their chosen level of independence, right? All right, so we're going to talk about one of the first pre-EDs, and that is job exploration counseling. That is counseling that's going to help students explore different career options. And you're going to hear over the course of this and a couple of other sessions, there are some catchphrases when it comes to pre-EDs. And one of those is going to be that it has to be aligned with their skills, interests, and abilities, okay? I'm also going to say that when we're talking about job exploration counseling, we're probably not going to hit all three for every single service, right? So when we're trying to build up that job exploration counseling skill, this can look like career assessments. This can look like job shadowing opportunities. This can look like informational interviews with different professionals. And this can just be general guidance on setting career goals. I am a big fan of this one. For a while, when I was doing a lot of direct services, I earned a little nickname. I was the Dream Crusher, because I would have really frank conversations with youth who had set career goals that were just not in line with their current skills, interests, or abilities. And so it was really important to have those very honest conversations about how they were actually going to get to that career goal. And if that was something they really wanted, or if something adjacent was really more going to be in line with them. So job exploration counseling, very important. Okay. One of the other pre-eds is going to be work-based learning experiences. So that's going to be where we can provide students with a real-world work experience, opportunities to gain practical employment skills. Okay, so this is an internship. This is an apprenticeship. This can also be job shadowing. So job shadowing can actually fall into quite a few different categories. Volunteering does count as a work-based learning experience. We always want to be careful when we're thinking about volunteering to make sure that young people and everyone involved understands that that's not always a career path, but it is a good way to gain practical experience. And of course, all the way up to part-time employment or full-time employment. That's probably not going to be appropriate for most of the youth you're working with, but wide range of opportunities. There's also counseling on post-secondary education as a pre-ed. So if we've talked about looking at job opportunities as a skill, we've looked at sort of gaining some job skills as a pre-ed. Counseling on post-secondary education is also one of those fundamental pre-eds. So that means helping students with disabilities explore opportunities beyond high school. Right, so most of the time when we're looking at pre-eds, when we're looking at 14 to 21 or 13 to 21 age range, there are going to be youth who are enrolled in some sort of secondary education. And so what do post-secondary education look like? This can be anywhere from filling out college applications, exploring college opportunities, looking at financial aid, looking at how to secure accommodations in post-secondary settings, and looking at these specific support services that are available in post-secondary settings. I'm sure a lot of us have probably seen students or families who think that they can just print out their IEP and then walk over to college and hand it off, and it's not how it works. So we want to make sure that young people are able to navigate all of these sort of complex resources if post-secondary education is something that they're looking forward to. And of course, it's not just a 4-year university, not just a 2-year university. There's lots of training opportunities that fall under this. And then workplace readiness training. So this is very similar to sort of gaining the real world experiences, but this is a little more abstract. So this can be things like resume writing, job searching, practicing interview skills. A big chunk of this falls under workplace etiquette, right? Or communication skills. And this can be broken down into really small parts, like how do I know when to take my break? How do I know the difference between my boss and my coworker and what an appropriate relationship is, right? These workplace readiness skills are incredibly important. A lot of times, youth without disabilities sort of gain these skills in very organic ways that youth with disabilities don't really have access to, right? Because of larger systemic issues. And so it's really important that we're able to go in and directly provide these services instead of kind of assuming that they have learned these services the way that we do with a lot of youth without disabilities. All right, here's here's the big one. This is one that I think is probably the most important one, and I saw a lot of y'all put it in the chat too, is self-advocacy, right? So self-advocacy means how do we teach young people with disabilities to communicate their needs, to know their rights, to know their preferences, and that's in schools, that's in work settings, that's also in the community and within their families, right? So teaching disability awareness and empowerment through things like workshops, direct classes, role-playing exercises, and then peer mentoring. Y'all might be sick of me saying that phrase by the end of this because I'm a big peer mentoring fan. Okay, so let's talk about how Centers for Independent Living can provide transition services differently. Okay, on the screen, this might be a little bit hard to see, but I'm going to explain it. On the screen are 3 circles in varying shades of blue, and they represent Centers for Independent Living, State Department of Education, and state vocational rehabilitation agencies. I'm going to use the phrase VR for those agencies. I understand that from a lot of different states, there's a lot of different acronyms. So you all probably have different acronyms. In fact, throw a couple, if you guys work with a vocational rehabilitation agency or you know of one, and it has kind of a complex or funny acronym, I would love to hear it. So feel free to throw it in the chat. We call ours SCVRD. Oh, that one just says Mrs. to me. Yeah, MRS. So lots of different acronyms. When I say VR, that's what I mean. Oh, see, it's so different everywhere. So looking at these 3 circles, and they're kind of all connected by arrows, right? One leading back to the other. Centers for Independent Living, they're the experts on disability representation, disability rights, self-advocacy, peer mentoring, accessibility, and of course, independent living. Okay, so that's definitely our area of expertise. Honestly, we probably have a lot of other areas of expertise because we have to fill in a lot of gaps, but that's what we're known for. That's what we're recognized for. And then there's the State Department of Education. So they're there to provide guidance and support to schools and school districts. They're the experts in special education, and they're also very aware of the gaps in education, right? They know what services they can and cannot provide that they have to reach out to. And then there is these vocational rehabilitation agencies, whatever the acronym might be in your area. They're going to be the experts in rehab services, in vocational guidance and counseling, and in job placement. So you can kind of see how we all have different skill sets, but we all have to put these pieces together to make the transition work. I am gonna harp on Centers for Independent Living for a minute because that's what's gonna be most relevant to us. So, and of course, we're just brushing up a little bit on our history, but I want to specifically spell this out so that we're all working from the same paradigm when we're thinking about effective pre-ETS and youth transition services. So the Rehab Act of 1973, we're looking at Chapter 1, Title 7. It specifically spells out the need for and the purpose of Centers for Independent Living. I'm going to read this right off the slide. Purpose of CILS is to promote a philosophy of independent living, including a philosophy of consumer control, peer support, self-help, self-determination, equal access, and individual and system advocacy. I'm slowing down just a little bit because I know the interpreters have a big job. They're to maximize leadership, empowerment, independence, and productivity of individuals with disability, and promote the integration and full inclusion of individuals with disabilities into the mainstream of American society. Now, y'all tell me, I know that this is the center of the CILS work. When you think about other agencies that you work with, how in line do you think they are with that mission? How unique do you think this mission is specifically to SILS? So like we'll keep a scale of 1 to 5. If we're thinking about the schools you work with, the VR agencies you work with, 1 being they're not aligned with this at all, none of these are their priorities, or 5 being actually we're all on the same page, we all value exactly the same things. Where's the overlap there? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I asked that specifically to point out how unique SILs are, right? So yeah, we might have a couple of people that really get it, but I don't think anyone gets it and prioritizes it like Centers for Independent Living. Centers for Independent Living are the only program required to be disability-led and to serve people of all agencies, of all ages and all disabilities, right? We're also one of the few programs that's required to diversify our own funding. And you're going to hear me talk about why I think this mission and focusing on disability-led services is important. So we are pretty unique as a Center for Independent Living. What actually makes us unique? So one of those is going to be that Centers for Independent Living are predominantly individuals with disabilities. So that means 50% of staff and 50% of the governing board have to be people with disabilities. I would say most SILs probably exceed this just for funsies. So like our SIL has, I want to say 87% people with disabilities. Do you know if you're at a SIL, do you know what percentage of people staffed are people who identify as people with disabilities? Oh, 100. Oh my gosh, I love it. Oh, that's great. I love seeing these high numbers. Yes, yes. Yeah, and it's going to be different everywhere, right? Yeah. This is definitely one of our strengths, right? Because we serve the community that we are a part of. So that lived experience enables staff to really relate to the youth and the people that we serve, specifically the youth, right? We can relate to a lot of these challenges. We can provide personalized support and guidance in a way that people outside the community can't. So I'm a person with a disability. They just recently changed the name of mine too, so I always get it wrong. It used to be overgeneralized autobiographical memory. Now it's severely deficient autobiographical memory. It's an offshoot of PTSD, right? So that means that I don't make memories the same way other people do. We're all gonna have a great time and this is gonna be wonderful. And you could chat me or see me on the street in a week and I'll smile and nod, but I won't know who you are or what you're specifically referring to, right? So a lot of the people I work with, myself included, are people with disabilities. That lived experience is definitely one of our strengths, right? And it creates an environment where young people feel understood, respected, and empowered. So, youth transition services and Centers for Independent Living, you can probably see where I'm going with all of these pieces. SILs provide this community-based, consumer-controlled service. We promote independent living for individuals with disabilities, and we offer things like independent living skills training, advocacy, peer support, information and referral if we don't offer a service, and then of course one of our big services, transition. So that can be transition from a home into the community, but also transition to adulthood, right? I mentioned earlier that Centers for Independent Living are obviously led by people with disabilities. I'm not going to harp too much on this, but just so that we're all kind of singing from the same songbook here, it's really important to understand historically that large portions of advocacy for the disability community have always been disability-led, right? We always have very powerful and important allies standing next to us, but people with disabilities are the ones who change the world to better suit people with disabilities. Um, this is things like Judy Heumann leading the 504 sit-ins, which led to the Rehab Act, right, being appropriately funded. This is Claudia Gordon, who helped pass WIOA, a deaf attorney. This is Justin Dart, who was a person who used a wheelchair, who helped get the ADA passed back in 1990, right? So people with disabilities are at the center of all of these key legislations. And I say that specifically to center the disability community when we're thinking about effective pre-employment transition services. So when I showed that kind of circle pyramid chart, we are very much a key part of those transition services, and it's because of our identity as people with disabilities. We also, when we're thinking about best practices when it comes to providing pre-ed services or providing youth transition services, I always like to mention that we talk about disability history with these services. We tie these points in history to a lot of the skills that youth are gaining. And that's something that Center for Independent Living can really do. We want youth to learn about disability rights, history, promoting a sense of empowerment, achievement, and making sure that they know that the contributions of people with disabilities are highlighted throughout history. So this context, this sort of historical context, really kind of informs the development of self-advocacy skills. So this allows you to be really motivated for them to share their voice, to express their needs, and to defend their rights, and know that their aspirations are worth sharing and attaining. Just double checking I'm hanging in there on time, okay? Oh, great, yeah. Okay, let's talk a little bit about peer mentoring. So peer mentoring, I believe, is incredibly important when it comes to effective youth transition services. Okay, great. The interpreter paused for 1 sec, so I wanted to make sure we're good. Okay, peer mentoring is incredibly important when it comes to youth transition services, right? And I'm going to use the phrase peer mentoring, but I'm also referring to programs that are peer-to-peer learning, which are in fact two different things. Peer mentoring can sometimes be an older person with specialized knowledge who's mentoring, whereas peer-to-peer is more about youth who are learning at the same pace, learning from each other. But both of these programs, they highlight the strength that youth with disabilities who have faced similar challenges, similar life experiences, when they can act as mentors, they can guide their peers with a really unique type of support through these transition services. This is where young people can connect, understand what people are going through, right? It's kind of the difference between empathy and sympathy, right? I can imagine what you're going through, but that's different from knowing what you're going through. Even though, of course, everyone has their own unique experiences, having someone who has similar lived experiences can be incredibly powerful. And of course, mentors can offer empathy, they can offer practical advice, they can offer encouragement in a really specific way. So when we're thinking about pre-eds, when we're thinking about the skills youth need to transition into adulthood, we want to tap into this really powerful resource, right? The youth we're working with can in fact help other youth build this skill. Just gonna check in the chat. Do y'all have programs that utilize peer mentoring or peer-to-peer learning? Or is this a goal of y'all's? Do you have programs that utilize peer-to-peer learning or peer mentoring?
We have a peer support group that we started back last month. It's a group full of peers and people who have disabilities, and we talk about different topics. Our next one is on friendship and the good and bad friends, what to look out for, green flags, red flags, what what we need to watch out for. Some people who are disabled, there are people who want to take advantage of you. And just because you're different, they think that, oh, you look easy, let me befriend you and then take everything you have, kind of thing. So we kind of give them a warning of, well, people are asking for money and they want money all the time. Well, that's not a good friend. You know what I mean? So knowing the good and bads about making friendships and how to differentiate. Well, I think they actually like me for me, or they actually like me because I can provide something beneficial for themselves. So where the line is, that like people don't know sometimes, and I think it's important to tell them this is good, this is bad, but also make decisions for yourself. It's a learning process. Not every friend is going to be great, but not every person is bad either. So that's what we're trying to teach people.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, double kudos to you first for being the first person to break the verbal silence. I love it. Thank you so much for chiming in. Number two, where were you before I started dating my ex? That's what I could have used. I mean, yeah, incredibly valuable skills.
That's awesome.
Uh,
Mm.
and I'm seeing in the chat too. Uh, yeah, so you guys have some really incredible programs with the goal to have even more. Yes. Well, hopefully some of these points are really going to help build these programs for you. Okay. So with that in mind, thinking about focusing on disability-led services, on utilizing peer mentoring and peer learning, kind of understanding how disability history plays into pre-eds. I also like to bring up this note when it comes to staffing. When we're thinking about staffing for pre-eds, especially as a Center for Independent Living, we want to lean on staff that are younger professionals with disabilities who can serve as mentors. We want to find peers who have had similar lived experiences as the peers in the communities that you're serving, right? So you want your staff to reflect the communities that you serve. So, and let me start by saying there is not enough money in the world for me to ever be a teacher. God bless anybody who does it. It is the toughest job in the world. But when we're thinking about pre-eds, especially from a sale perspective, really don't want to think of teachers as the same person. Teachers have their place in pre-eds, but it's not the way Centers for Independent Living really need to focus on pre-ed. So really should be relying on teachers, on parents, and then there are some incredibly strong allies who are people without disabilities. But when we're thinking about staffing concerns, when we're thinking about who's going in to teach classes or who's going in to perform these one-on-one services, we do want to try our best to lean on young people with disabilities. As an old person who can like give you instructions on how to VCR works, trust me, hiring and working with young people will humble you really quickly. But it's incredibly vital to try and get our workforce into that paradigm. Okay. So I was going to do a whole breakout room thing, but I feel like we're all friends here, and you guys are doing great. Love the energy. So take about 5 minutes, and I would love if someone is comfortable to come off mic and share. But I'm wondering, what is a unique strength of your agency, and how do you think that strength complements either an agency you work with or the community at large? So I'm going to mute myself, and we'll all sit here in a vaguely awkward silence for a couple of minutes, and then a brave soul is going to share their knowledge. And I can clarify that question again, but it's also on the screen. What's a strength? And then how can that strength complement an agency
I
or
think our
community?
I think our biggest strength is that of all the sills, and it's that we're consumer led. Everything that we do, whether it be one-on-one, even if we're partnering with DVR or another agency to work with that youth, but whether it's one-on-one or in our youth group, it is always led with their input and what they want to be focusing on. And they're the ones, I mean, my coworker and I, so I guess I'm not technically a youth with a disability anymore, but when I started this position, I was a youth with a disability. I'm now 29, so I'm entering into that older range. But that was another piece, was I was kind of in that role as the youth, the peer, and then my coworker has been doing it for 20 years and is just an expert in all of this when it comes to working with that population and connecting with us. And so we have always worked together as a great team, but everything we do, even when we're working as a team, is led with the youth, and they're part of all of our decisions, and get to have a great relationship with all of our staff, including our managers and everyone, to help make all of these decisions that has to do with them.
Morgan, don't forget that we do have a youth who's getting ready to age out, who wants to volunteer and wants to be a part of that leadership role, take on some leadership roles as a mentor for the youth that he has been with for some time. And so I think that's really exciting to see our youth rising up, that even though they're getting older, they want to be able to be a part of that mentorship process that has been developing.
No, 100%. Thank you for bringing that up, Shemaine, because that is like the greatest thing to watch, is seeing them rise from people that are needing the services to people who are ready to teach others about it and help them with their transition. And this youth particularly just got their own housing and is head of household for the first time in their life. And things are just really amazing to watch for all of our youth and all of their places where they're at in life.
I love that. Thank you all so much for sharing. Yeah, absolutely.
And Troy, you might have seen them already, but there's a couple contributions in the chat. I see Jacqueline Nagel shared that we're a team, we take a family approach and use the life course tools. Danielle Bennett said the relationships we've built within the community to help bridge the gaps between schools, businesses, and the youth/young adults we serve. Jacqueline also shared their strength is really collaborating with others. And then Jamie added, our unique strength is that they have a great team of knowledgeable professionals, and they're also very empathetic. So whenever someone needs help with something, they're encouraged to collaborate with each other to make sure that their consumers and or the community are receiving the best possible services. And last but not least, Joanne Healy shared that their SIL is small but mighty. They're always consumer driven, creative, and offer activities and programming based on the needs of consumers. And they're embedded in the community and have great partnerships to build resources and collaboration. A lot of common themes on collaboration and building relationships in the community, which is great.
Yes, absolutely. Collaboration is going to be key. And I see Aaron's comment on peer mentors having creative communication and those soft skills, connections. Yeah, the connection to that independent living philosophy. Man, that IO philosophy is key. Absolutely, absolutely. I do want to. I want to go back. I think it was, and I don't know whether it's Jocelyn or Jacqueline, probably Jacqueline, who mentioned that they have a family approach, and they're using the life course tools. As much as I'm kind of harping on these kind of peer mentoring programs and these opportunities to work one-on-one and working with youth, the family is such an essential part of these services, right? No matter what that youth's family looks like, whoever is in their support network, we know that the data says that if the family is on board, then the youth is going to be more likely to succeed. So we definitely want to make sure we're utilizing that family support and guidance as much as possible, because odds are the family, if they're there and supporting, they're going to be supporting in some way pretty much for the lifetime of the youth. I mean, that's, I am not a parent. I'm a proud dog dad of 3 beautiful pups. But props to all the parents out there. And you know, you never quit being a parent, right? That whole unit stays central to your life. And so support goes on and on. Yeah, absolutely. We've got a link to a blog. You guys are incredible. I love this. Yeah, thank you all so much. I love hearing about the work y'all are doing. I'm hoping that as we continue on and as we talk about the minutia programs, some of that's going to help you expand and build. And if y'all have any tips, I'm open as well. Let's scoot on to a little bit about data. So I am a pretty data-minded person. What about in the chat? Do we have any data nerds? Do we have people that like get really excited when a formula works in Excel, or like, no, just me? Okay, that's fine. I'll be alone. I'm a big fan of, thank you, Aaron. I'm a big fan of making sure that data is backing up what we're doing, right? We can do something that feels right, or we think it's working, but we really do need to make sure we're following best practices, that we've seen other people do the same things and it's working for everyone, right? We need to know what the data shows. So I'm going to focus a little bit on a study that was written by two doctors, Charlie Walters and Tony Plotner, who we collaborate with at Able, South Carolina, because they're local in the state. And they wrote a piece called Centers for Independent Living and Secondary Transition Service Delivery for Students with Significant Disabilities for the Journal of Rehabilitation. I personally like it when journal articles have that little punchy title afterwards that like makes it sound fun, but this one was a good read too. And what they did was they surveyed centers for independent living across the country, and they asked for some of their protected data to see if what they were doing was working. In fact, some of y'all might have actually been a part of this survey. And so what they found, very briefly, was that, first of all, disability-led services are understudied. That's probably not a shock to anybody, because unless you're working at a center for independent living, there's not going to be a lot of disability-led studies or services. So we know that the impact is understudied, but we know that the research about these studies does show that disability-led approaches are more successful than when non-disabled people teach people with disabilities, right? And we just talked about why. We talked about the power of the community, the power of being able to create that rapport, of having that lived experience. And so the data also shows that this is effective. They specifically found that following the value-based principles of that guide SIL professionals most likely results in best practices and effective transition, which is to say that the key sort of tent poles that guide a Center for Independent Living in all of its work, if we apply those specifically to transition services, even if maybe you're not in a SIL, but if you can keep these values front and center, this is going to create effective transition. Oh, Jacqueline, I'm stealing that. I'm sorry, I'll give you credit, but nothing about us without us, supported by data. That's exactly it. Megan, remind me to update these slides if we do it again. So what are those value-based principles, right? It is empowerment, autonomy, and independence. It is youth-led and individualized services. It is coming from a strengths-based approach and a goal-driven approach. So never from a deficit model, never from starting with what you can't do, always starting from what you can do and what you want to do. It focuses on peer-based and disability-led services. And of course, it is available and accessible services, which sounds really simple, right? But that might be the most complicated thing to be able to do logistically, is to make your services available to everyone and to ensure that they are accessible to everyone. On the screen, you'll see an image of 3 young men who attended one of our summer programs, sitting in a college auditorium, and they're working on a goal ladder where they're each mapping out an individual personal career goal that they have using what they've learned at one of our summer programs. Now for numbers. So specifically from this article, what they were able to find was that collaboration between Centers for Independent Living and schools is essential, but it's not commonplace. So out of 198 CILs, they rank school coordination as either important or extremely important, 25% and 72% respectively. However, they rated that coordination either adequate, poor, or non-existent. A simpler version of that would be in a more recent survey that they quoted of 541 professionals at CILs, 75% CILs reported weak or no collaboration with school-based transition. Real quick in the chat, how do we feel on that 1 to 5 scale? What do we think about our collaboration with schools and VR? Would we rank it as 1, not even happening, or 5, it is great, it is wonderful, can't wait to tell you all about it? Okay. It is a challenge. Oh, Brandy, I love that reframing. Your effort is high, your effort's a 4, but it's about the response. Yeah. Teachers have to wear a lot of hats, that's for sure. Okay, great. That means you're in the right place. So the article did end talking about what are some questions for transitional professionals. So if you are, and if you're looking for some really quick takeaways, I know that you're going to be able to access these slides. Also, if you're like Troy, related to the memory thing, you're going to think, oh, I have these slides, I've got it all down, and then never open these slides again. But these are just some key questions to ask of yourself and your programs based on what this data found, which is when you're self-analyzing these programs yes, absolutely. And we can send that article. It is linked in the slides. And of course, Megan's already done it because she and Rebecca are awesome. So what are the questions that we can ask ourselves about our programs? To what extent do you facilitate activities that build disability empowerment with your students? So that is to say, do your programs create a sense of, is it painting disability constantly in a negative light or as something to overcome? Or does it instead paint disability as an important aspect of a person's life that shouldn't be tied to shame, right? Because that has to be specifically taught. What peer-based supports do your students or the youth you work with currently have access to? And then are students with disabilities empowered and well-informed to exercise their rights currently and into adulthood? Because that process changes as you become an adult. Advocating for your rights in school looks a lot different than it does in your community as an adult. So are we acknowledging that early on? All right. Y'all, I thought we were gonna have a bunch of dead air, and instead, I think we're actually right on time. I don't wanna jinx myself. But moving on, what can sales do for you, right? What can sales do for you? I'm going to sort of paint this as a, not really a problem and solution or barrier and solution, but I'm gonna point to what are the things that a school or VR has to offer, and then what can a Center for Independent Living do to complement or enhance those pre-ed services. All right. So when we think about schools and youth transition services, this is another photo of one of our older staff members who has since moved on to work at another CIL. A young woman with brown hair working with a young man with a disability with glasses. who is, I believe, filling out an interest form in this one. So schools are responsible for providing education, support, and transition services to students with disabilities. And that's commonly in the form of an individualized education plan, an IEP, a school-based enterprise, which I'll sometimes refer to as an SBE, and a career and technical education center, which is often referred to as a CTE, because schools and agencies just love our acronyms, just love it. So when we think about a school and their IEP, right? An individualized education program, just in case you're not directly working with students or it's been a minute since you've been in the classroom. IEPs are designed so that students with disabilities can have access to accommodations that allow them to work towards relevant career and educational goals that are in line with their skills, interests, and abilities within the least restrictive setting through free and appropriate public education, which, yes, a lot of those are also acronyms, LRE and FAPE, if you've ever run into those. The reality is that many teachers can feel unprepared to support students with complex support needs or complex accommodations, especially because they're often serving very large classes and all of these students have individual support needs. Students and families, likewise, might not be aware of an outdated IEP or a goal that's irrelevant, or they might know that an IEP isn't serving their student, but they don't know what their avenues towards advocacy are. Curious from anybody in the chat, did any of you come from education or you still work directly in an educational setting? In a former life, I was a high school English teacher. I know I kind of give off high school English teacher vibes. And it was a very, very difficult job. Tessa, I would say daycare counts. Yeah. Oh, for 30 years. Oh my gosh. I can say that from my personal education as a teacher, we had like one 45-minute class on what an IEP was, and that was it. So a lot of teachers just don't get a lot of direct ongoing education and best practices for IEPs. So also they have too much to do, there's too much on their plate. So how can a Center for Independent Living complement these services? If you are a Center for Independent Living, how can you complement the transition services that are already happening at your school with respect to IEPs? So SILS can help youth build self-advocacy skills to create student-led IEPs, and they can provide professional development for teachers, right? That's one of my favorite things to do is when a teacher requests information about how to work with youth and adults with disabilities, even if they've got a degree in it, there's still something a Center for Independent Living can do to provide an extra boost or more reasonable, or excuse me, not reasonable, more recent knowledge in a way that only SILS can. So we can build up those skills in students. We can help provide that PD to teachers. We can also remove some accommodations. We know, or excuse me, we don't want to remove accommodations, remove barriers, which can look like sometimes accommodations aren't honored, right? Teachers don't fully understand the difference between a preference and an accommodation. There are sometimes staff that are working from really outdated paradigms of disability. They're still rooted in the medical model. And so helping staff kind of understand the current way that we work with the disability community. And sometimes it's just physical barriers to school resources. We worked with a youth recently where the school was, man, they were trying. They had reached out to us and they were working with the family, and there's a young man who used a wheelchair and really wanted to participate in field day. And the even just to get onto the field involved them leaving through a different exit, going around the building, and then having to exit through another gate to access the field. And they took about 10 minutes to do that, and then the gate was locked and no one knew how to open it, and they missed the entire field day, right? So sometimes there are physical barriers that stand in the way. These are never from anything that's maligned or malicious. It really is just making sure that teachers are educated, which is what we're here to do. Oh, we got some great stuff in the chat. I love it. That's why you provide educational advocacy, represent, the bridge between parents and the schools. I like that. I like that. Worked in a preschool where a majority of kids had IEPs and waiting on evals. Yeah, okay. So that's with regards to IEPs. When it comes to school-based enterprises. So school-based enterprises, they allow students to kind of practice those soft skills, those work skills, really those work readiness skills. It's almost like a work-based learning opportunity, but it's not paid, so we don't count that. In a controlled school environment through small-scale businesses and services. I'm always just curious because we have a ton of these in South Carolina, but they all do very different, unique things. In the chat, what's the most unique thing that you've seen a school-based enterprise do? I think ours was dog biscuits, which were great. They made dog biscuits, but also there was one that made artisanal soaps. I got a gift basket. That was wonderful. I think my dogs would prefer the treats, but school-based enterprises can do so many things. However, build raised gardens, Amber, that's a great one. When schools have school-based enterprises, they can sometimes fall into certain traps. So that means that can be staff that are actually working harder than the students are. They kind of fall into this bizarre traditional business model where they're very concerned about output and meeting demands. And so teachers end up doing more work instead of allowing students to grow into those roles. Schools may not really plan to transition students from school-based enterprises into more advanced work-based learning. So they might keep youth in a school-based enterprise, or once they've kind of completed that school-based enterprise, that's it. They don't revisit or push those skills anymore. Those are some of the things we've seen schools do. And so as a Center for Independent Living, what can we do? We can provide work readiness pre-eds to build opportunities for peer mentoring and individualized planning to make sure that these are effective transition services. School-based enterprises take a lot to build up. So we can be the ones to make sure they're actually effectively moving into and some sort of opportunity for employment. Advocate for students to receive services in the least restrictive environment. All right. And then CTEs. Yours had a, wait, I'm catching up on the chat. Morgan, yours had a cafe, does dog grooming, childcare, and sells t-shirts. Whew, y'all were busy. So career and technical education centers, CTEs, they provide sort of a formal setting where experts from the field with advanced tools and machinery can allow youth to learn more advanced and career-specific interests for vocational training. But we've seen some patterns where maybe a student isn't allowed to attend a CTE because of some sort of disciplinary issue, or the CTE has high demand with students already, maybe students without disabilities who are using these services, and so students with disabilities, there's no room for them. Or students with disabilities can go to a CTE and then they end up in a segregated environment where they're not learning the same skills. And a lot of this might come from professional staff who work at CTEs who largely aren't always educators. They're coming with their own unique knowledge, but they don't feel prepared to support youth with disabilities, right? They see it as some sort of risk, or it's going to take more than they have to give, or they'll need really complex accommodations. So it's intimidating, and so youth don't ever get to try these services. Yeah, Jacqueline, you nailed it. So what does SIL do to help with these CTEs? They can provide that professional development to educators so that students and families and educators all understand what their responsibilities are for these youth. They can offer common sense accommodations and modifications so that youth don't need to be an entirely separate space. They can work alongside their disabled peers. It just takes a couple of common sense accommodations. And then they can also provide a structure that allows them to reframe behavioral concerns so that youth aren't being barred from this service for disciplinary practices. VR agencies and youth transition services. So we talked a little bit about what can a SIL do to complement a school. Now we're talking about what a SIL can do to complement a vocational rehabilitation agency, whatever your acronym may be in your state. VR agencies are state and federally funded that provide services to individuals with disabilities. That includes transition age youth. And this can be career counseling, job placement, vocational training, assistive technology, and getting accommodations in the workplace. So when we're thinking about career counseling through vocational rehabilitation services is where they assess consumers' abilities through an evaluation, and then they provide guidance on what job training they might want to be a part of, what job search strategies are going to be best for them. And then through job placement assistance, VR can help consumers arrange job interviews, conduct some outreach to employers, create job opportunities for consumers, and offer ongoing support once they're in a working environment. And VR can even provide individualized services like job carving, but that can be really difficult to facilitate. And you can see a pattern where sometimes VR ends up relying on the most, I'll say reliable resource in the community. So maybe that's one employer who is hiring people with disabilities for one job, and they end up kind of funneling youth into that. In a past life, I also worked at vocational rehabilitation, so I understand that's a very high pressure job. You're asked to do a lot, and your resources can be limited. So I encourage them to rely on Centers for Independent Living. So when it comes to career counseling, Centers for Independent Living can provide consumers with that independent living skills, which is going to help them explore career options and practice interviews. I don't know about y'all, but if you've ever been in a position where you don't have a job and you're trying to find a job, and there's also a lot of other life stressors going on, which always tends to coincide with not having a job, it can be very, very difficult to find a job. And so Centers for Independent Living can kind of step in and help provide those independent living skills to get people on track so they can benefit. They can also teach consumers self-advocacy skills so that a consumer working with VR can voice exactly what they need, right? A lot of times VR might not provide a service because it's not specifically asked for, or they can't assess that an individual needs a service. So we need to be able to help individuals with disabilities that we're working with advocate for those needs. Job training is another service VR offers. So they can offer training that looks like classroom instruction or hands-on skill development. They can help arrange apprenticeship or on-the-job training, certification programs. One of the most amazing things about VR is that they can also offer financial assistance for a lot of these programs. So financial assistance for college or specific job training or equipment you need. However, and I say this as someone who used to work in VR, there's a lot of bureaucracy to navigate when it comes to VR, and sometimes these financial resources can kind of be held up or limited. So what can we do as a Center for Independent Living? We can tap into a local network of peers to help find additional resources and additional job opportunities. Has anybody had a friend or a family member kind of help them get their foot in the door for an interview somewhere? Because I definitely have. Does that happen for anybody? Just me, maybe? Yeah, sometimes it takes having that personal connection in the community to get that process started, especially nowadays when the job market's flooded. Centers for Independent Living can also help employers job carve or see the benefit of employing people with disabilities. For those of you that work building social capital, oh, you were full of sound bites, and I'm stealing every one of them, Jacqueline. Centers for Independent Living they can also work directly with employers to help employers see the benefit of hiring people with disabilities. A lot of employers, especially if they're not connected to the community, they don't see the benefit of that, right? And so being able to go in and have conversations with them and have them see the benefits of hiring people, it is an advanced, but it's a key part of these youth transition services because they have to have the opportunities to step into. When it comes to assistive technology from VR, vocational rehabilitation can evaluate a consumer. They can recommend tailored assistive technology. They can provide training and support on how to use that assistive technology. They can fund the purchase of specific assistive technology and also provide support to make sure it's appropriate and it's being used in the workplace. When it comes to SILs, we can use our firsthand knowledge and that peer support to provide more advanced or practical training on assistive technology and maybe offer custom ideas or less traditional ideas. I don't know about y'all, but if I'm going to work with an agency and they're going to provide me with a cane, wheelchair, or walker, I would rather be trained by someone who uses those implements rather than just someone who is able to buy or design them, right? So that's where Center for Independent Living can really come in. And then for accommodations, VR can assist consumers in identifying what their accommodations might need to be, how to request an accommodations, how to implement accommodations, especially if an employer might be reticent, and address any functional limitations so that people with disabilities can equally engage in the workplace. When it comes to Centers for Independent Living, how can we assist and be a part of that process as far as assistive tech or as far as accommodations goes? We provide information and guidance and advocacy on the workplace's obligation to support people with disabilities, right? So we know the laws, we know the rights, we know the history, and we're able to help educate employers and consumers on what their rights are, and that starts early, that starts young. Okay. Been talking for a lot. We have talked about a lot. I'm going to do a quick recap, and then I'm going to pause for some questions. So just as a recap, transition services are designed to prepare and support youth as they go into adulthood. The lived experiences of SIL staff help people relate to challenges or offer personalized support. Data shows that following these values is in line with best practices, and SILs have unique ways that they can complement and support VR services. Okay, I'm gonna pause. How are we feeling? How are we thinking? Thoughts, questions, feelings, concerns? Very right, Amber. Yeah. Sales do make a difference. You guys make a difference. You're doing the work. Yeah. So one thing about trainings that can sometimes annoy me, because I have been to plenty of them, is that people really talk about vague ideas, but they don't talk about how to do them. Or I hear all these great ideas, but I know they don't work for my specific situation, or I need something specific. So We do have more sessions. We have 2 more sessions in this where we're going to be talking a little bit more about the nuts and bolts. But I'm curious, especially to inform my edits to the upcoming presentation. What kind of questions do y'all have that wasn't really addressed by this overview? What are y'all really hoping to learn or gain? See a couple things in the chat. Phases of peer mentorship. Oh yeah. And Kate, I'm going to work in some breakout rooms so you guys can also connect with each other, because there's a lot of knowledge in this room. Connecting with youth. I think I addressed the connecting with youth piece because I said wear the baseball cap backwards. That's pretty much it. That was a joke. How sales can be funded for pre-ets. Oh, yeah. That's a tough one, but we are going to talk about it. Hearing success stories. We did hear one great success story, so got about 10 minutes. Does anybody have a recent success story that they want to cap us off with before Megan takes us into logistics? Any awesome success for the week? I've got one I can share, but I'd rather hear from y'all. Any cool successes about youth transition? Best practices for teaching disability pride to children and youth. Love that one. Yeah, we are going to be talking about that. I will briefly share a recent success of ours and then let Megan take us home. We work with a young person who's been working with us for years who did not want to be a part of our youth programs, joined us for a temporary summer program, ended up getting dragged into our longer summer program and then really liked it, ended up building a lot of skills and becoming a peer mentor, interned with us, and then got a full-time job and now speaks on the national level about transition services. And he's going to be the keynote speaker at that same summer program that he originally went to and share his story. So that's a recent success of ours. Okay. I appreciate everyone's time and attention and enthusiasm. I hope we picked up some good things. I'm going to hand it over to Megan to navigate, to talk a little bit about the next session and navigate these last slides.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Troy. And yeah, I want to echo what you said. Thank you to everyone who's been actively participating in this conversation. I'm amazed by all the contributions in the chat, and really appreciate those who kind of came off mute and asked questions or contributed. So our next session is going to be on Thursday, June 26th. So in 2 weeks from now, after this call, probably tomorrow, you'll receive a follow-up email from aodemploymentta@gmail.com, and that'll have the link to the recording from today, as well as the slides that we shared that are also dropped in the chat, but you gotta scroll up and if you need to get to those. So if you have any questions in the meantime, you can reach out to Troy. He was kind enough to provide his email on this slide here. And you can also look at the different ways to connect with Able South Carolina on their various social media channels or email lists, as well as on their website. Troy, anything else to add on that?
I really hope you guys reach out. I love making those connections and answering those personalized questions. So feel free, and I'll share that for every session.
Awesome. And Troy, feel free to add in here, but we do have this QR code here. This is sort of like your homework that I was referencing. So in advance of the next session, we'd love to hear more about your pre-ETS program so that we can kind of tailor the session content and discussion to you. So you can access that either through the QR code here, and then I'm also going to pull that link and drop it in the chat in case you prefer to do that instead. At least I think I'm going to do that. It's not copying and pasting. Okay, here we go. So you can fill out that form there, and then we'll just use that to kind of fill in some details ahead of the next session. And I mentioned earlier, we will be sending out the calendar invites for that June 26th session as well as the one in July tomorrow as well. All right, and otherwise, if you need anything else, or you have an accommodation request in advance of the next meeting, you can reach out to the DETAC team at aodemploymentta@gmail.com. Thanks everyone for joining, and really appreciate it. And thank you, Troy, for facilitating our first session and kicking us off today. Hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody. Looking forward to next time.